Before we settle in to another Friday night filled with toppies and hangers and hopefully a fight, before we order pizza or open up a beer, this is sure to make you laugh more than Vickery's career. Thoughts with Eddie, from Delidio to Kelly. Thoughts with Eddie, from Jong to Bontempelli. Tune in to Thoughts with Eddie and find out who will win. Trev struggling with Facebook and Bunga's stupid grin. From Canberra to Karratha and Adelaide in between. And Hayden up in Tokyo tormenting Asian teens. Thoughts with Eddie will tell you who is fit. Thoughts with Eddie will tell you who is shit. The Thunderdome's gone global and we're bringing you their news. A shortened version for the fans, compressed like Maddie's shoes. Thoughts with Eddie, if your friends ask you should tell 'em. Thoughts with Eddie, hashtag fuck Callum.
Welcome to Thoughts with Eddie. I'm your host, Eddie Anchor. We've got a big show planned for tonight. It's Anzac Day weekend. We've got a lot of footy on tomorrow. We've got a lot to cover. Let's get straight into it. First cap off the rank, let's take a look at last week's matches. Well, there was a few upsets last week with Trev securing his third victory in a row, winning by about 42 points. It was a cracking match. Chris defeated Mick in an amazing come-from-behind victory. It was something to behold. 4 last quarter goals from Mark Lacroix. That got the job done. Poor old Tricky was left there with his thumb up his arse. Robbo getting the business done, defeating Ben. After a huge Friday night from Ben, it was expected he was finally going to break the duck, but Robbo managed to claw him back quite magnificently. Matt rolling Callum by just under 100 points. That was pretty clinical in the end, really. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. Andy defeated Williams by a lot, which is pretty poor by Williams, considering Andy was one of the lowest scorers of the week. Tom defeated Bung by a record margin. It was 504 points. I didn't even think that was possible. A big 2025 score by Tom takes the new record as the top score in the competition. And last but not least, Steve. The man that they tipped to have a terrible season this year is started off in great fashion with a comfortable victory over last year's champion in Hayden, who is still yet to register one on the board. So if we take a look at the ladder, we can see Matt and Trev still undefeated after 3 games, sitting on top. Then we've got Tom after that huge win, followed by the superstar in the commish who's sitting in, rounding out the top 4. Robbo started off quite well, and then the rest. If we scroll right to the bottom, we can see Hayden, Callum, Ben and Williams forming their own barbershop quartet. Alright, now, it's time to move on to this week's matchups. Let's take a look at the commish versus Ben. In the inaugural season, this would have been match of the season. The talk of the town. These days, though, it is the pulling power of a 1995 Daihatsu Charade with one bad cylinder. These two used to be the #1 ticket in town. A monopoly on the top of the table. How the mighty have fallen. If this were a Wimbledon match, it would be the equivalent of the mixed doubles finals that nobody could give a stuff about. This is the biggest mismatch since Ben took on his new dog Coco. The commish will be crossing every finger in hope of regaining 2 of his best 3 players in Boyd and the Bont this week. Ben, on the other hand, has pinned his hopes of victory on the chest of Jack Grimes and Ben Reid. Wait. And this just in. Apparently Will Minson is also a late out for Ben, so that's going to make things even tougher. But on Ben's side, his team has the potential to score huge. And with Dusty and Jack Stevens playing against their old club for the commish, there is plenty of motivation for Ben's players. Motivation aside though, they ain't going to get the job done. The commish by 110 points. Chris versus Hayden. There's going to be a long road back for last year's champ as he's still failed to trouble the scorer in this new season. Premiership hangover perhaps? Or maybe one too many Sakis.
Chris has gotten his season up and running despite being without two of his premium players in Brett Deledio and soon to come Ollie Wines. He'll be hoping he can limp home and keep Hayden's unwinning streak going. I think the duck is about to break though. Chris could be in trouble. Hayden by 19 points.
Callum versus Robbo.
Huge in for the self-proclaimed 2015 up-and-coming champion in Callum as Tommy Rockstar Rockcliffe returns from a nasty broken rib. All of a sudden, that midfield is looking a little more potent. Bernie Vince may have the biggest say in the outcome of this game as the man responsible for carrying Robbo up the ladder in Trent Cotchin is likely to cop the same treatment as Dangerfield did last week. I guess the decision for Robbo has to make is Cotchin a better, harder, more determined and loyal player than Dangerfield is? Could decide the match, Robbo. Choose carefully. I think it will. I think Robbo backs in his skipper. He knows Cotchin's better than Dangerfield, and he'll continue Callum's runabouts. Robbo by 47 points.
Andy versus Matt.
Matt will be forced to defend his title as the main man again this week as he comes up against the self-proclaimed orifice of fantasy football in Andy. It's hard to see Matt losing a game any time this season as his team is just chugging along like a well-greased machine. With Zaharakis under a cloud though, they say he's going to play, maybe not. He's down to one on the bench. He might face his first hurdle of the season. Andy spent all week under 3 foot of water and may not even be able to fly out of Sydney in time to coach his team this week. The good news though. Good news is that Williams' team will be no better off for his input this week, so he'll be able to stand in for Andy should the need arise. I suspect it would also be in vain as Matt will continue on his merry way. Matt by 120 points.
Oh, the big matchup. Here it is. This is the one we've been waiting for. Bugger versus Trev.
Continuing his lucky streak, his winning streak, Trev is coming up against one of the true characters of the Thunderdome. In the next 4 days, Trev will truly learn what it is to be a member of the Thunderdome. First, he will be told his team is shit. Then he'll be asked for a trade. Then he'll be told that Bunger is only trying to help his team. Then he'll be reminded that victory should be assured because of all the injuries that Bunger's had. Then he and everyone else will be swiftly told that Joe Watson was picked up in round 2 after he scores 100 tomorrow. But, as usual, ultimately, about mid-afternoon on a Sunday, Trev will receive the message that while Bunger may have managed to score 1,500 with only 15 players, he concedes defeat. In contrast to Trev, who refuses to partake in any sort of self-indulgence at all until probably 9 weeks after the season's already finished, then he might go a little bit of a pip pip hooray. That being said, Trev's on fire. Bunger is out of the 8 and he won't get back in this week. Trev by 300 points.
Now we move on to Steve versus Tricky.
We've got 2 teams filled to the brim with players, which is certainly not normal for Tricky. Usually he's got about 4 or 5 out. Steve has exceeded all pre-season expectations by winning 2 games already this year. He wasn't even tipped to win 2 at all this year. With that team goal being ticked off, it will be interesting to see where he puts his focus on next. The team matchups certainly do suit Tricky this week though, with his better players having an easier run of it. That being said, the GWS playing Gold Coast will decide which way the game goes with a number of the guns from both of the teams in that match. Tricky seems to have broken the injury curse and will continue to push forward with another victory this week. Tricky by 70 points. Tom versus Williams. And playing off for the Who Gives a Fuck Cup this week will be Tom and Williams. After a record-breaking 2,000 plus victory last week, 2,000 plus score last week, 2,000 plus victory, fucking hell, that might be this week. He'll be hopeful of keeping that form going. Wouldn't we all? He can hope all he wants because last week was a fluke, and I suspect this week will be a massive letdown. Surely Williams' luck has to turn around because people are starting to call him Churchill, the amount of young men he's sending to the slaughter every week. He's overdue, and I finally think this could be the week. Obviously, someone has had a word in his ear because he's actually picked Tomahawk back up again after he dropped him. Good call there, Williams. And I expect that decision to pay off handsomely. What a guy Williams is. But we'll discuss that later on. Either way, victory, Williams by 11. Let's take a look at the how the Bungslow medal is shaping up. As we can see on top of the leaderboard there, we've got David Mundy and Jordan Lewis with 6 votes each. And coming in just behind them is superstar Trent Cotchin. This is going to start hotting up later on in the season. We've got a couple of early bolters. Fife's up there, but yeah, at the moment his teammates giving him the run for the money. Alright, now, we move on to a segment that probably, how do we put this? Well, it disturbed me a lot. Earlier in the week, another show that I host called Rock Bottom. It's all about getting the breaking news, the hard-hitting journalism, the serious side of Eddie. So anyway, we had an interview with Thunderdome coach Andy on Rock Bottom midweek. Needless to say, it was a rather shocking interview. But that's not for me to say. That's for you to be the judge. Take a look at this.
Welcome to this week's edition of Rock Bottom. Tonight, we go deep into the tawdry world of fantasy football. Professional outfit or a coach's playhouse? Rumours have swelled in the recent weeks that the coach of Uptown Bung You Up has been going over and above what is expected of him as a coach. He has been quoted as calling it the personal touch. A few of his players who wish to stay unnamed have told a much different tale. One of wandering hands and a little too much massage oil in the locker room. After discussions with his management, Andy has agreed to come on the show and straighten, for a lack of a better word, things up. Now Andy, you're obviously quite a clever man and certainly no stranger to speculation. I won't beat around the bush with the niceties. You are no doubt more than aware of the accusations levelled at you by some of your players, in particular the young ones. The most disturbing thing is probably the bizarre pre-game warm-up you insist upon. To raise player testosterone, you insist they insert vibrators into themselves while you watch.
You know, it's amazing what these gadgets and gizmos can do nowadays, but that's, you know, as I say, we've got a wonderful technical team.
So you don't deny this practice is taking place?
It's all part of the dance.
It doesn't stop there though, does it, Andy? 3 separate players have claimed that you are quite insistent that all of the young talent spend one night a week in your own personal bed.
As long as we get these young players bedded in, and whatever it takes to get these young players bedded in.
I've got to say, Andy, I'm quite shocked at your candidness, to be honest. You almost seem proud of yourself.
It's all part of the dance.
I have to ask, why did you insist upon mutual masturbation between the players while you watched?
Because I don't think that he could do any worse doing it like that than he has by himself.
Oh dear. Okay, alright. We're right to keep going? Okay. I've got to admit, even I feel uncomfortable going into this place next, but Andy, public sodomy. What is the players' reaction to this?
Everyone winces a little bit.
One player didn't quite hit your spot, did he? And you were quite aggressive towards him after this, weren't you?
High expectations for this lad, but he's not quite on the button yet.
Well, Andy, relax. Listen, we're just doing the interview here. There's no need to move out of your monotone. Let's keep this civil, shall we? Alright, so we'll move on. The leaked vision of the senior players having to manually pleasure you to get a game. Do you know what you were thinking?
I do know what I was thinking. I'm fucking fantastic and you're all lucky to play with me.
Alright, so we move on to the really hard to handle part of the interview. The more the story grew, it became quite clear this wasn't limited to just your own players, was it, Andrew? You've been almost forcing your preferences on other coaches in the league, haven't you?
Yes. We did give Callum the old touch up in that first round there.
Have these rendezvous been limited to just Callum?
It's a great question. I've actually been pretty impressed with Trevor thus far. I think he's performed quite well.
The word from Chris is he felt quite rejected that you didn't force yourself upon him at any stage.
He's just not quite there in terms of the rest of the league.
I guess you knew we were going to go to this place. It was pretty public news. It's not the sort of thing that you can run from. But the scandal on draft day, the one that saw Matt ejected from the draft. While the footage was obviously grainy at best, you could quite clearly see him performing a one-man show for you in the back row. What are your thoughts on Matt?
Sat next to him at draft day. I was very impressed with his performance. It was really quite a performance to behold. Maybe that's because he was sitting next to Ben and just everything by comparison looked significantly better.
So I guess I have to ask, if you had to rate your heterosexuality on a scale of 1 to 10?
Anywhere from number 1 to number 1.
So Andrew, for this homosexual romp to cease, what would actually have to happen?
I think I would have to really nail the league this season.
Alright, that's thank you for your time, Andrew. You're a sick man and you need to get yourself some help. That's all we've got time for on Rock Bottom this week. Tune in next week for another hard-hitting edition. Makes me shudder just watching that back, to be honest. He's a twisted individual. Let's just hope he gets the help he needs.
Now, that's all we've got time for this week. We've run out of time. We're trying to keep this episode as short as possible, but with that big interview, we're going to have to push the weekly wanker from this week on to next week, and we'll get on with things. Now, football starts in 1 minute, so have a great weekend. Good luck.